About 220 million years ago, when the supercontinent Pangaea began to break up, two giant continents were formed: Laurasia in the north and Gondwana land in the south, separated by the Sea of Thetis. The history of South America begins about 65 million years ago, when a large landmass split off from Africa and began its drift through the waters. Separated from other land areas, surrounded by water, South America was an island. The land bridge to North America would come later. For now, unique life forms evolved in South America. A time period this long is long enough for the development of individual and unique species, unique to the particular environment. And that is what happened in South America, where specific and original life forms developed. Some of the animals which live here today are the direct descendants of those aboriginal inhabitants. The armadillo, for example, is a miniature replica of the gigantic glyptodont, a smaller relative which has barely changed in appearance during millions of years. The giant anteater is another of the early inhabitants of South America, a prime example of how isolation can lead to the development of special adaptive features to help the animal in its search for food. Its relative, the tamandua, has a similarly unique and exclusive design adapted to securing its particular food. There were large numbers of marsupials in South America during the prolonged period of isolation. The huge, aggressive species that filled the ecological role of predator have disappeared, but they have left smaller relatives in the opossum family. Although they appear harmless, they are ferocious hunters of the smaller creatures of the forests. The animals of this earliest period in South American history were strange and unusual. Only here, on this continent of wonders, can we find an animal as outlandish as the brown-throated three-toed sloth, which moves at a speed of 16 feet an hour and hangs from a tree for days at a time. Unique species also developed in the air. The huatzin, for example, and archaic birds in which we see traces of the long-extinct Archaeopteryx. The extraordinary huatzin, with its specialized digestive system, is very well adapted and has managed to survive in the Amazonian jungle through millions of years. For a bird, it flies very badly, which seems to take us back to the distant past when reptiles first left the ground and learned to fly. In other words, when they became birds. During the 65 million years of South American isolation, animals had fewer natural enemies, both in the kinds of predators and their numbers. There was therefore less need for camouflage that would make one species appear invisible to its hunters. That is one explanation for the many fantastic colors. A bird as spectacular as the legendary quetzal could not have paraded its colors in an environment filled with predators without superb camouflage. Thanks to this camouflage, it now survives in an environment filled with predators, both mammalian and avian. In the long ago, the balance of life between prey and predator in South America was perhaps less constantly fraught with danger. Or perhaps we are romanticizing a peaceful Edenic past before a slow but insidious development. For in North America, so near yet still separated from South America, a much more competitive world existed. A world in which the motto was kill or be killed. South America, a biological island for 65 million years, was not completely free of the influence of its northern neighbor. In fact, several small islands and promontories emerged from the arm of water that separated the two continents, and these were used by some species of the so-called island hoppers to invade and penetrate the lands of the south. The large family of monkeys was one of those that succeeded in immigrating, finding an exceptional environment for expansion in the abundant jungles that covered the continent. Another group that managed to penetrate via the chain of islands in the strait was the rodents, which, having settled in South America, changed their features and developed very different appearances. Thus, some rodents became aquatic, as in the case of the coipu, which spread through the extensive southern wetlands. Other rodents avoided the valleys and took to the mountains, like the vizcacha, which climbed to the great heights of the Andean Altiplano. Then, about 2.5 million years ago, an enormously significant event took place, which was to alter things drastically: the rise of the Isthmus of Panama. The two continents of America were henceforth united. The great American interchange was about to begin. The invasion of the South took place in stages. Some rodents and primates probably arrived far earlier by island hopping. When the land bridge appeared, a whole contingent of North American fauna arrived. Most soon adapted to the tough competition of the Holarctic region. A forerunner of this group was the coati, a restless, not very discriminating animal, willing to take advantage of any opportunity. The coati and the raccoon were the advance party of what a little later would be the great invasion by the animals of the north into the lands of the south. They were powerful creatures, like the felines with fur camouflaged the better to stalk their prey, extremely efficient predators from the competitive north. Another arrival were the Mustelidae, likewise accustomed to the dialectic of life and death, with no allowance for mistakes or weakness. The canines, too, poured in with the waves of invaders. The maned wolf took up residence in the regions of the Chaco, in the heart of South America. The new arrivals were much more adept at fighting and hunting. When the existing inhabitants of the south came up against these animals from the north, many of them perished. The visitors from the north became the lords of the south, and of a natural wealth that was simply non-existent in the north. Everything here in the south comes in superlatives. The Iguazu Falls, the most spectacular in the world. The Amazon, the mightiest river. The Amazon jungle, the largest in the world. The Atacama, the driest, most absolute desert. The marshland of the Mato Grosso, the largest expanse of marsh. The Andes, the longest range of mountains. All in all, South America was and is a fabulous explosion of excesses. South America was a multiplicity of environments, but above all, it was a continent where water was superabundant. So much so that the majority of animals had to adapt to this superfluity of water. Thus, the marsh deer developed hooves that can be spread widely and have a strong membrane between them as an adaptation to permanently swamped lands. The heavy tapir, a relative of the horse, wound up adapted to living in regularly flooded jungles. In fact, the superabundance of water in South America is the explanation for the large number of animals that have learned to climb trees in order to avoid the water. Other species of animals avoided the water of the lowlands when they invaded South America by heading upland into the mountains, settling in the vast wildernesses of the Andean mountains. One of these species was the spectacled bear, the only member of the bear family in South America. It found a suitable environment in the cloud-covered forest, the very humid jungle that grows on the eastern slopes of the Andes. The camel family also installed themselves along the great mountain chain that runs down the southern continent like a spine. The llama and alpaca and the wild and elusive vicuña live in the rarefied atmosphere of the Altiplano. The Camelidae prospered in South America. Substantial numbers moved south as far as the inhospitable lands of Patagonia. These guanacos, the undomesticated form of the llama and alpaca, settled in the extreme south of America. So the wild animals of the north resettled in South America, and there they lived for another 5 million years. And then, only yesterday, there was a new invasion of living beings who were to have an even greater impact. Now humans, too, came into conflict with the original occupants of the area. And just as it happened a long time earlier, the new invaders dominated their predecessors. And so, the story of South America is the story of successive waves of intruders who displaced the original occupants. It has always been like that. But the most recent invasion was different. In the past, although the newcomers exterminated the previous inhabitants, they adapted to the landscape. Only humans had the skill and the wish to transform nature to suit their convenience. We cannot know what that will ultimately mean, whether the landscape and fauna and flora of South America will be able to survive the depredations of its most recent invaders.